the term from which he shaped another sphere around the globe, which describes a layer of interactive thinking and action, and ultimately of collaborative connections of love among human groups around the globe. It is an invisible, yet nonetheless real layer enveloping, surrounding our planet, like the biosphere or the atmosphere in which we live and breathe. So he sees this as this membrane that surrounds the globe. And some people have sometimes said, Teilhard is really the prophet of the internet. He would have loved the World Wide Web, because in a way that is an expression of this idea of the global noosphere that we are all part of. And he saw this as an accelerating movement towards greater unification of humanity spreading across the earth. This great vision of the oneness of humanity first again dawned on him at the front, when at night, in his night watches, he silently contemplated the fullness of the moon suspended above the earth, shining over the trenches. He then realized that in spite of the turmoil of war, humanity is drawing more closely together in an ongoing process of evolution to form a greater unity. In a visionary essay written in the trenches in January 1918, he described the rise of a unified thinking earth. He writes, "This evening, as I saw the single block into which we are all on the point of solidifying, for the first time I had the feeling of emerging from our race and of seeing it as a self-contained whole. And I felt as though we were all linked together and floating in the void. This evening, in the agony of the bloody schism which at this moment is dividing the world, namely this fight of the First World War, I saw the frontiers of mankind. Even in this century, people are still living as chance circumstances decide for them, with no aim but their daily bread or quiet old age. You can count the few who fall under the spell of a task that far exceeds the dimensions of their individual lives. Unless adult humanity is to drift aimlessly and so to perish, it is essential that it rise to the concept of a specifically and integrally human effort. In other words, we are all together in this. We have to make a great effort. After having lived for so long, done no more than allow itself to live, humanity will one day understand that the time has come to undertake its own development and to mark out its own road. This already anticipates what he writes in many essays later on. We are responsible for our own self-development. What do we want the world to be? What do we want our society to be? And how do we go about creating a better world? It is we ourselves who have the responsibility for this. This is really what drives him ahead. To explain how humanity is going to become one, Teilhard developed a theory of creative union, which tries to set out how the many can become one, not through fusion or loss of identity, but in a higher form of union, where the individual elements are enhanced by being united at a deeper level. This is a new, complex synthesis of a higher order, which produces something new, and whose ultimate outcome or spiritual summit Teilhard calls Omega, the point Omega. I can't say more about this here because it's a very long topic. But his thoughts about the human phenomenon are a fine example of contemporary reflection on the age-old philosophical problems of the one and the many. He understood the individual human being as part of the whole of humanity, or at another level, as an atom in the body of the mystical and cosmic Christ, as I've already said. Humanity is part of the stream of life within an evolving world and cosmos. And in many ways, his thought is very ecological, for he could not see the human being except as part of nature. To interpret the significance of the human phenomenon in relation to humankind, and humankind in relation to life, and life in relation to the universe, is the basic plan of his great book, The Human Phenomenon, which I've already mentioned. The rise of self-reflective thought or consciousness is, however, not a simple byproduct of evolution. It is the very key for understanding evolution itself. Any further development of evolution is linked to a further advance of thought. And this is why research has such a central function in Teilhard's work, for it is essential for the further social and cultural evolution of humankind to do research in order to develop ourselves. He foresaw, in fact, a world civilization, not understood in the sense of dominant uniformity or in the fragmented manner of post-modernity, but in something higher, a better life for us all. Not an automatic development, but something that we have to take in hand. We have to exercise moral and ethical responsibilities for shaping the future of humanity. So this is very important. And ultimately, this is not possible without using the greatest spiritual resources, which are represented by the powers of love, understood in a deeply Christian incarnational sense. So the theme of love is very, very central in his work. I can't go into this here in any depth, but that is really, really important. Now, he used different images for trying to inspire people to take this task forward. He speaks of the building of the earth, and he compares this building of the earth not to an architect's plan, but he compares it, like St. Teresa did in her mystical writings, to the tending of a garden with numerous plants and diverse soil. Or he speaks sometimes of the construction of a house with many materials brought by different laborers. At a deeper level, from a religious and mystical perspectives, he understands the awakening and growth of the spirit as an increase in the reality and consistence of the incarnate word becoming flesh in the world. From his long experience as a researcher and traveler mixing with different social groups, he was acutely aware that the modern ideal of the divine and the nature of human religiosity were undergoing great changes. Contemporary spirituality is closely linked to the scientific understanding of life in the universe, to the importance of human efforts, to the responsibility we must take on for our environment and planet. The most sincere and passionate human aspirations must thus be integrally linked with our understanding of God. Now, I've got a long section in my paper here on how to take on responsibility and how to develop particularly what the French called le goût de vivre, which is in English translated as a zest for living. It's really the sense of the love for life and of really living life to the full, but in a responsible manner, and seeing life as a task of spiritual transformation, which is particularly linked to the use of the power of love. And he saw this, he really saw love and union as central to Christianity. For him, the Christian God is above all a God of love, who can ultimately only be reached through love. So he dreamt of a humanity that forms one single body, animated by one single heart. A great visionary of human unity, he ultimately saw the building of the human community as a spiritual task, leading human hearts to the heart of God. A heart burning like the blaze of fire in the midst of matter, radiating through the entire cosmos. And that brings me to the third element, the divine as a Christic center. Teilhard's perception of the divine contains a strong Christic element. He understands this as an energizing divine presence or center, a fire in all things, which he describes both as a heart and a divine milieu, understood as a center. For Teilhard, God's creative action takes place through the immense evolutionary process in the universe, and human beings are an integral part of this process. His image of God is commensurate with the greatness of the universe, with the dimensions of the cosmos discovered by modern science. He felt that much of traditional theology works with an image of God which remains far too small in comparison with all the knowledge we have acquired by now. He shared his deep dissatisfaction with many contemporary critics of religion, but he understood their atheism to be at root a deeply dissatisfied theism. The God, our image of God, is not big enough. He experienced the divine as closely linked to the cosmos and centered on the cosmic Christ, incarnate as heart and center of every element in the universe. His powerful perception of the immanent presence of the divine within the universe is described in his book, The Divine Milieu, written originally in 1923 for those who love the world. For many years, this text was widely circulated in manuscript form amongst friends and colleagues, but to his deep disappointment, he was never allowed to publish it during his lifetime, so that it only appeared after his death. It troubled him immensely that while science has revealed to us the immensity and unity of the world, the implications of our tremendously changed understanding of the universe and of life have not yet been fully incorporated into theology and spiritual practice. More theologians may be concerned with the relationship between science and religion today than during Teilhard's time, but there is no one else who has so radically thought through the ramifications of the contemporary scientific and ecological worldview for Christian spiritualities. In The Divine Milieu, Teilhard writes as someone, I quote, who believes himself to feel deeply in tune with his own times, in other words, to read the signs of his own time, and someone who sought to teach how to see God everywhere, to see him in all that is most hidden, most solid, and most ultimate in the world. He conceived of his book as an essay on life or an inward vision which was not specifically addressed to Christians, but to those who primarily listened to the voices of the earth and to the waverers, both inside and outside the church. The expression, the divine milieu, captures two different experiences. On one hand, it refers to milieu as the environment that surrounds us, like the air that we breathe. On the other hand, milieu also means a central point, a center where all realities come together. The divine presence in the world is this mysterious milieu, radiating like an atmosphere throughout all levels of the universe. We are immersed in this milieu. It can invade our whole being. It can transform us if we but let it. Teilhard called it also a mystical milieu, a divine ocean in which we may be swept away, in which we may be divinized. So for him, the essence of spiritual practice is to establish ourselves in the divine milieu, to become part of it, live it and die in it. Thus we can find plenitude and fullness of being, which lead us to the omega point, identified with Christ omega. To be surrounded by and live in this divine milieu, to experience it like an ocean in which we are immersed, is celebrated above all in the text, The Mess on the World, written in 1923 in China. And some of you will know this.